Our last speaker today is across the pond in the U.S. His name is Dr. Charles Tahan, and he is the Assistant Director for Quantum Information Science, or QIS, and the Director of the National Quantum Coordination Office within the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. He was born and raised about 2 miles from here. He salsa dances, and he works very closely with my former boss and her team, as you know, VP Kamala Harris. It's a pleasure to welcome him to the stage, Dr. Tahan.
All right, thanks for having me here today. We're really here today to talk about, what the last 12 months have brought to our respective countries' national quantum initiatives. In the U.S., this last year has really been about renewal, thinking about what the next 5 years of the National Quantum Initiative will look like, because the act that Congress passed was signed by the president in 2018. So we're at exactly tomorrow is the date that the Congress is supposed to renew the National Quantum Initiative for the next 5 years. But when you ask and think about renewal in the future, it's good to remind yourself why you're here in the first place. Why is quantum information science still important to us today? And, listening to our previous speaker from the UK say he was going to talk about history, what I thought I was going to see was David Deutsch, in the 80s, starting to play around with these weird things called quantum circuits on this magical things called quantum computers. Because to me, that was the first spark, or one of the first sparks of this new field that's now called quantum information science and technology. And if you think about what has happened over the last 30 years, it's been really quite remarkable. We have now a new field of physics, of technology in QIS. That's not true of, for example, nanotechnology. Fundamentally, quantum information science is different. It's a new thing. It's one of the largest divisions of the American Physical Society now. When I started as a graduate student, it was not even a division. It was barely a working group, in 2000. So there are many things to be proud of along the way. Quantum information science has not just given us a new way to think about physics, but thinking about quantum computers and sensors and networks have allowed us to improve classical algorithms. They've allowed us to improve classical and adjacent technologies like clocks and amplifiers. When we think about where we were 23 years ago in terms of qubit development in my field of expertise, the best qubits in solid state at the time were a nanosecond long-lived. Right now they're hundreds of microseconds, milliseconds, even seconds, so orders of magnitudes of improvement. So there are a lot of things to be proud of in our accomplishments. And I think the takeaway message is that quantum information science is not a technology, it is a foundational field that will influence many different technologies. That's why it's different. That's why it's listed as one of the national science priorities alongside AI and biotech and other areas. It really is something new. So in terms of the US, what we've been doing over the last 5 years, building off that previous 15, 20 years of investment by the federal agencies, is creating a national program, launching 13 or 14 now national quantum information science centers across the country, bringing new people in the field, stealing people from particle physics, from electrical engineering, from mechanical engineering, to help grow the base of scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs that will, enable us to grow the applications that will benefit society in the future. And in that respect, we've been, quite successful, I think, in the implementation of the NQI. And really, our strategy, which we wrote back in 2017, 2018, has not changed dramatically. We've augmented it, but it hasn't changed dramatically. First, continue to take a science-first approach to QIST. Recognize that this is still an emerging science technology. It's foundational, and that we have to answer the hard questions that are impeding or gatekeeping further investments towards making this something that really will change society. Part of that is applications. What are the applications of a future quantum computer besides the few that we've discovered and know will be transformational? What are the key technical challenges in material science, engineering, and so on that need to be solved before we lay out the quantum network across the country, before we invest in large-scale development? Those are the things you need to do first, so you're not wasting resources that ultimately in the U.S. the taxpayer is giving us, and we have to be responsible for. Second, how do we ensure that the United States and our friends and allies are leading this new field? Because we have seen how information technology has completely transformed our lives, our well-being, our defense in the last 100 years. So it's completely crucial that we continue to do that, and we do that in a way that protects the investments of the government, the companies, our scientists. And how do you balance those risks? Quantum is also quite unique in that right from the beginning, it's had this dual-use nature, the great promise of applications for economic and scientific benefit, and the threat of breaking our the encryption standards that we've decided to use as the basis of all our secure communications, really. And then third, how do we enable our people? How do we ensure that they're trained so that they can take advantage of the jobs that will come with this new field, but also that the advantages that we think will come from this investment will benefit the highest number of Americans possible. So that, those core tenets are still the same today as they were. And in the last few years, we've augmented those with more deep dive strategies into what should we do about quantum networking? What should we do to bring quantum sensors from the lab to market as one of the first examples of translation for QIS? What should we do about quantum computing? How do we move the whole nation to post-quantum cryptography, which is a classical technology that's resistant to future quantum computers? How do we do that as soon as possible so that we can ensure the safety and privacy of our information shared across the world? So that's what we've been doing strategy-wise. But as I said, the last year has really been about renewal and what does the next 5 years look like? And we've taken a number of kind of deep dives into thinking of that. One of the ways again, just to remind you that the U.S. government is a big place. The country is a big place. The way science funding and development works in the U.S. is that we have many different agencies that have different missions that need to be implemented. So NSF is responsible for the broad foundational science, investing really in the future. Department of Energy has its mission around the nuclear stockpile, around the future of energy sciences, Department of Defense, and so on. All of their own missions, all of their own ways of implementing advancing science. And that produces a very, robust and heterogeneous system. And then we have other agencies who are tasked with helping them or using the technology that are being developed, like the FBI, who will help companies protect themselves against bad actors or other crimes. We have the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, right, who helps figure out how are we going to deal with the new laws around IP in this respect. We have the end user agencies like the National Institute of Health, the Department of Homeland Security, who are looking to take these sensors and apply them to biomedical applications or to Homeland Security applications. So it's a very heterogeneous group of people, and that's really what my job is in the White House, is to help coordinate all those agencies in writing a national strategy, overseeing the implementation of it, and deciding on the future. One of the key tenets or parts of the National Quantum Initiative Act was an external advisory board designed to bring in talent from industry, academia, national labs, and government, and provide advice to Congress, the President, the Director of OSTP, and other senior leaders. And over the last year, they've really been thinking about one question, how has the NQI gone in this country, and what should Congress consider doing in the next phase? Where can we improve? And you can go on Google and see the testimony that I and others gave. You can see this report. We are very transparent in this country about what what we're doing, what we're planning to do. Everything is on quantum.gov. But I can just give you a rundown because it's probably useful to for you to know what we're thinking. First and foremost, we had it right. You still need to focus on the science. There's a lot of stuff to do in computing, networking, sensing, enabling technologies, quantum-inspired algorithms, and so on. That still has to be full steam ahead. And with these new centers stood up, we need to see what science is going to come out of them over the next 5 years. So full steam ahead on that. But number two, in terms of things we're missing or could be augmented, really starting to take that science and move it to application and create this new field of quantum engineering was something that was highlighted both in our recommendations from the federal agencies, but also in this advisory group. We need to start putting more investment in showing some wins of this technology. How is this going to really affect the people ultimately? And that comes into sharp focus when a congresswoman asks you, how am I going to explain this to my constituent? What is the thing that's really going to matter to them about this thing called quantum, right? What is your answer to that question, right? So putting those investments in, and there's tremendous opportunity that has occurred in the last year through the CHIPS and Science Act that has passed, one, to fund new onshore infrastructure for manufacturing of chips and packaging and associated technologies. For sure, quantum will be a part of that emerging technology research, both in the DoD Commons portion of the bill, which was just actually announced a week ago. Several hubs will be focused on quantum, and in the National Semiconductor Technology Center, which will be run and administered by Commerce and NIST. They will have components that are quantum focused or quantum enabling. And also in the Science Act, which authorized several new large programs for quantum networking, for user access to quantum computers, to find applications, to grow the quantum computing community, for Q12 or quantum education and outreach. There's tremendous opportunity that can be met, should those be funded fully in the next couple of years. Lastly, and maybe just as important as we need to broaden the National Quantum Initiative, but beyond the core R&D agencies, the Defense Department, intelligence community. Those are the agencies that have been funding this for 20 years, but we need to add agencies like NIH, NASA, DHS, the State Department. We have heard today about the long history of cooperation in quantum. This really has always been a global field, about our steps collectively, the leaders of the national quantum strategies, to work together to really put out a science-first approach to how policymakers should think about quantum. But we need to back that up. And in the US, again, we have a very federal approach. Every agency is doing its own thing with international partners, but we would really benefit, and this is one of the recommendations from an international fund focused solely on cooperation. So that's another thing the agencies recommended, the advisory group, the presidential advisory group recommended, and I hope to see happen in the next few years. So with that, I'll just end and say it's been a tremendous honor being able to work with all these people you've just seen in the quantum community in general. One of the things when I started as a grad student in 2000 that I immediately noticed compared to other fields was how nice the people were in quantum. For whatever reason, quantum technology, quantum science, it's a very good community. And I think it's to our credit and it's our responsibility to keep that sense going because it really, it's an attractor for people into this new field. And quantum is more than quantum physics. If you think about the skill sets that go into building a quantum computer or a large sensor network or a quantum networking system, these skill sets, ASIC design, physics, computer science, and so on, these are skills that any young person or old person will benefit from, no matter how this field ultimately turns out in terms of technology. The final thing I'll say is, when we think about applications of quantum information science, it's very broad. We're not just looking for the commercial applications that will create a trillion-dollar market. We're looking at applications that will benefit the missions of our agencies, if those are to know where our submarines are or our spaceships are or whatever, or to do great science. We have core missions within the government of how does the universe function? What is dark matter? We build facilities like CERN and LIGO to answer those questions. And if quantum computing or quantum sensing helps answer those questions, that is a tremendously useful application for society. And sometimes we forget about that. And I think in the next 5, 10 years, those may be the most promising applications for what we are all trying to build. So thank you with that, and thanks to the organizers.